So I was out on a walk with my family. We were in Washington, D.C. in the fall, and with Angela, Abby, and Eli, we came across this image, these tall, mountain-like structures. I want to tell you about that walk, and my goal in doing so is to do exactly what I'm asking each of you to do, and that is to respond to an idea in Chapter 3. Some of you doing it by article, other by prompts that I've provided. So what about this walk? Well, it is the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. And while I'd heard about it, I've read, I've written, I really didn't know what to expect. As you walk through this opening monument, you can see just how tall it is. And there are these words, just as you enter. Out of the mountain of despair, a stone of hope. A couple of days ago, I shared with you this phrase, crisis, which crisis events can often bring a sense of despair. And I told you I would talk with you about an event I went to where that term was being claimed. In all honesty, I was skeptical because I believe the term crisis can be overused and applied to situations that it shouldn't be applied to. But in this case, before my time was over, I became convinced that the word crisis certainly made sense, and I found myself with a sense of despair. Crisis. Specifically, the numbers began pouring out. Probability of a child living in poverty drops by 82% if in a two-parent home. Wow. But yet 40% of kids in our country are born out of wedlock now. There's been a drop in marriage rates, with nearly 80% of all adults marrying and 52% today. Indeed, one startling idea was how infidelity is now sold. Actually a big business, with one organization grossing over $60 million since opening in the early 2002 and only going live on the internet in 2011, in openly acknowledging the problematic ethical issues in promoting people to be unfaithful. And then the cost, $100,000 in government cost over a 10-year period for each couple that doesn't stay with that commitment in marriage. In 2011, an estimated $330 billion in assistance to single-parent homes. A major social crisis, if you will, and a cause of despair. For me, it takes on the face of somebody I just visited in prison whose marriage is no longer present, whose relationship with his kids is now broken. Or another individual who I'm on the phone with who's wondering if they can hold their marriage together. And all kinds of stories that all of us could tell that have faces. And for me, it's most often the kids have faces that I run into at Scouts or I run into on the soccer field. A cause for despair. Sometimes, are you this way? Things just get too big. And I'm aware of people trying to make a difference, but sometimes they seem too big. And I wonder if King and some of the individuals surrounding him didn't feel that at times. How do you end this long-term pattern of racism? And now, how do we turn the corner on what looks to be an impossible situation to change? What do? Well, you go back to D.C. And if you spent more time at that monument, you'd realize that this hope, this stone of hope, is not so much King himself, but the relationships he formed around ideas that were true. So around the perimeter on each of the walls are quotes, ideas that he sought others to join him arm in arm about. And I want to talk with you about a couple of those quotes, one in particular that I'll end with. Each of these quotes relate back to an assumption that we're holding throughout this semester in this program. The notion of social constructivism. Berger and Luckman say that they assume that our interactions with one another create our most basic understandings of life, and that families, groups, organizations, and cultures are created by what? People and conversation. And so the importance of finding truth, ideas that are big enough for us to lock arms around and move forward together, ideas that become bridges, that form organizations, that create causes for hope, is really what I believe a good course on organizational cultural analysis should be about, and a program in applied communication should be about. So, a few big ideas from King. When he accepted the Nobel Peace Prize in '64, he said, "I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right, temporarily defeated, is stronger than evil, triumphant. And then move ahead to 63. He says, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. That statement, though actually a year before the previous one, was a theme through so much of his teaching, so much of what he had to say, that our response to difficulties, to injustices, should always be about light and love. And then this one, 4 days before he was assassinated, we shall overcome. We shall overcome. Because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. That idea undergirded his relationships, his commitment, and really his worldview. And if I asked what hit me and struck me as I began to reflect on that statement, walking around that cool, brisk November morning, it was this. King held a worldview that he had developed from the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth that basically assumed that good wins, love wins, and that his faith in a creator God that says grace, mercy, and justice can live together, formed in knit bonds of union with people all over the world to be about big ideas that were translated into social movements, organizations, and relationships that healed. But even if you didn't share King's commitment and my own commitment to that worldview, there's a pragmatic to communication in the social constructivist perspective that can find a bond for us to face whatever difficulties we may face, whether it's a relationship in an organization with one coworker or the challenges that I've talked about in the context of marriage and family. That bond is built around the idea that our response can trust that truth will win. That response where I return in difficult situations, I return and bring good to those situations. I seek to speak hope to those situations. Ultimately, there's a pragmatic that suggests it's the best way to go. The best way to go to create hope, whether it's a crisis, a moment of despair, a crisis on a national scale, or a despair in the midst of a difficult moment in an organization, we can learn to respond in ways that create something better. And that's the idea I hope you will stay with as we move through the semester, where we look for those moments when somebody is doing that, and we learn to find ways to reinforce and strengthen those conversational moves that build better organizations. And we learn from those positive communication moments to see a cause for hope that we really need to be able to stay with it in our response to difficult situations.